Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at something a little bit more interesting. We're going to be looking at the Basic tab. Now this is a Basic tab and it is used to make most of the adjustment in an image. So as you can see, we have a very overexposed image, a very bright image. And first up is exposure. If you increase exposure, the image gets brighter. And if you decrease exposure, the image gets darker. Now for this image, leaving it around here is pretty much the best. As you can see, comparing it back, it's a much better image already. So now let's do a few different edits. So first off is contrast. Now increasing the contrasts will make the dark parts darker and the light parts lighter. Now leaving the contrast at around 17, or you could bump it up or down, it depends. Now highlights are the brightest part of your image. If you move them down, the light parts get darker. If you move it up, the light parts get brighter. So moving it down a bit is pretty good for this image, because it's a very bright image. Next up is the shadows. Now the shadows affect the darker parts of the image, right here. So if you increase the shadows, that part gets lighter. And if you decrease it, it gets darker. Now in this case, I would usually bring the shadows down, because if you bring the shadows down, you get more detail in the three people standing over there. Now the whites. What the whites do is make the white parts whiter. So if you press Alt on your keyboard, it brings up a mask. It makes your image dark. And don't be confused by it. Now if you move the slider, it will bring up clipping, which means this is where the whites are really white. As you can see, very white. And if you move it down or up, you'll see it will change. The same thing happens with the blacks. If you press Alt, you'll get another mask. And clipping, where blacks are very black. In this image, I would usually keep the blacks quite down. If you shift and double click on whites or blacks, it will set it up to the recommended specs. But usually the recommended specs are not the best, so I urge you to experiment. I usually like it so it clips the whites a bit and so it clicks the blacks. Now moving down is clarity. Now clarity makes your image look sharper. Basically that's the gist of it. If you put it to 100, it'll look very sharp. If you put it to -100, it'll look very unsharp. I urge you not to use 100. It's a bit too much and looks too edited. Usually around 30 is pretty good, but in some situations more. Next up is vibrance. Now, vibrance makes your image look more colorful. As you can see, right here in the window. Less makes it less colorful, and more makes it more colorful. Now, moving on is saturation. Saturation is a bit more extreme. It's like vibrance, but more extreme. For this image, I wouldn't use vibrance or saturation. I would convert it into a black and white. Why would I do that? Because black and white images usually hide overexposed or underexposed parts better. It makes the image look much better. As you can see, the blacks look better and the whites still look good. So that's been all from me, and with the Basic tab you can do most of your editing. Thank you and goodbye.